Welcome to the inventory management system, resulting in a dashboard. Let's get started by creating our summary sheet called the inventory summary. Now, this you won't probably have to do, but it's worth demonstrating to you. Rather than me typing all of the items that we're going to have in our inventory, I'm just going to copy the text that describes it from the problem, and let's just find a place to paste it temporarily. This is not a final thing, and what we're going to do is just paste that piece of text that we extracted, and then there's under data there's something called text to columns, and in our case delimited, and what that means is it's divided by commas. Now there's other things in there, we'll clean it up, but that breaks things into the pieces that we need. So you can sort of see that it's in separate columns. Let's highlight those things. We're going back to copy that and find an approximate place where those items will go when we start to create our table, and paste transpose. This is the reverse of what you do when you're going across. Before we had a list down and we copied across. Now we take an across and copy it down. I want to clean up a little bit. Trim will take the spaces off the beginning of a piece of text. So you see there's some spaces there, and I want to clean those off. And I can copy and again paste values. I want to put them back now without the space in there. And then I can get rid of the original or the trim function business. And now it's just basic editing and putting caps and things like that. But, well, let's just do a few of them. We won't do everything here right now, but let's just get a little bit of editing done. And then we'll come back and finish the rest later. This is obviously not something that's a complicated part of what we're doing. So let's actually maybe just go ahead. Let's put a heading here. This is item description. We could put a separate column where we put like unit description or something, but let's keep it simple. So that's item description, and let's make that wide enough to accommodate what's going on. Get rid of the junk over here. That just needs to be cleared completely. And then let's go and start to create our table. So this is not going to be new, but again, rather than type things, let's go find our title. This is fake U, and so we can copy that from our original problem, move over and paste that in A1, and let's see that. Let's use that paste this time, and then just edit. So up in the formula bar, you see fake U becomes university, and this is our office supply or supplies management system. All right, that gives us a decent title. Approximately there, we can readjust our merging if we took too few or too many columns, but it sets it out, and we can do a little bit of setting up of colors, bolding, change the font to a larger font, maybe just even go with a different style. I really like Arial for a lot of things, so maybe we could just do that. Notice that I was able to type Arial in the font box. Okay, so I'm not sure what happened to my color, but I'm going to go ahead with that as our color. And now let's put in a couple more headings here. For each item, we want to have a unit, or actually let's just call it an item ID in this case. The important thing is that we're going to have an ID, and we want the item not only to have an ID and a description, but we need to put in the quantity, and apparently I still have my caps on. There we go. Quantity in stock. Now, obviously, that's a little bit big for the column. We could widen the column, but it's going to be a small number. So maybe let's do something different here. Let's wrap the text, and then we'll center it both vertically and horizontally. Now that allows our quantity, and then we're going to add a wrinkle here. We're going to call it value, and won't use the French version. We'll use that. All right, and yes, it's probably not the French version, just a misspelling. All right, bold those, and then adjust the size a little bit to what works. All right, let's go ahead and change the font for the whole area at once. Something different. There we go. Really sets it off. Not necessary to do the fancy font, but obviously anything that makes it look more attractive. Now our item IDs, nothing's told us what they had to be, so we can use whatever we want. I'm going to come back and fix that after I do a little bit more font here. Obviously, I don't want everything to be item number 10, but let's make sure we have all our caps. We like how those are, except perhaps we should make it italics. All right, so back to the item ID. You notice that it copied the 10 down. We want to tell it that we want 10, 11. So in this case, we do a suggestion of 2. We need to, come on. We need to highlight the 2 items, and then by selecting 2 examples and pulling down, now it fills in using our example. Our example was 10, 11. For formatting, again, we can wrap that since we're already using 2 rows in 1 cell for quantity and stock. And we'll set our columns a little bit better. And now that we are narrower, we don't need the title to be quite so large. Now that we have set up our sheet so that we have our master, we need another sheet, and it's going to be our purchases. These are the items going into inventory. The headings for this can come from the main sheet, at least some of them. We'll have to make modifications, but let's just copy what we have. We've got some formatting here that we can take with us to be consistent, and we'll, in this case, not have any title at the top, and there are reasons for that. We're just going to have the title be the purchases name on the tab, and then up here we'll start in row 1 with the actual headings for our purchase database. As I do some formatting here, just font, spacing, etc., I want to point out that we're using the title purchases to avoid confusion with things like shopping lists, since it's an actual purchase history. We tend to use list, estimate, and projection for planning activities, and report or tracking when the data is historical. Be careful to understand the difference between those things. Be watching when you do a project as to whether you are doing cost estimating or cost tracking, and be clear of what those are. Now I added a column here. I inserted a column for the date purchased, since that is something we need, and we'll have quantity purchased and price per unit. Notice this item description kind of doesn't look the same as the others, so we center it vertically. All right, so now we want, once we get that all nice and pretty, we're going to begin to set up for our data to be entered. Now to do that, because this may be done by some clerk or something, we want to control as much as possible the quality of the data being entered. So for item ID, we don't want an item ID that doesn't show up in our master list in the inventory summary. So under data, it's a little bit hard to find. You can see what if analysis, and under some versions you'll see a separate category for what we're looking for. But here it's just right in the middle with an icon. It's called data validation. You'll see the drop list, and you want to choose data validation. In other words, I want to validate or qualify what data goes in. In this case, I'm choosing a list, And where's my list going to be? Well, I already said I want my list to be only those items that show up on the inventory master or summary. So I click on this. This allows me to focus and see the screen better. And I go back to the tab and inventory summary, and I select all of the item IDs, but only the ID, no title. And they should be in order, although depending on how I set up my VLOOKUP, it's not necessarily necessary. So now it will validate. Now, notice quickly the little plus or the little arrow beside item ID. That means, and you'll see how we have to choose from a list. All right, now item description is actually going to be a lookup. Remember we did grade lookup, only now we're going to use the ID, the item ID, to go back over to item summary and find the item description. I'm looking through my list for lookups, that kind of function, and then in my functions, particularly VLOOKUP. There was HLOOKUP, but we're looking for VLOOKUP. Now, we should know by now how to use it. Our first thing is what we're looking up, which is the item ID. The next thing is where we're looking for it. And again, we want to use our list in the item summary. And again, we want the list without the headings. It should include both the ID and the description. And of course, the description is in the second column. So we enter 2 for that. And then down here, as the description says, we want an exact match, not an approximate match. So that means entering false. And then you see that it recognizes that value. Okay. Whoa, what's the problem? That doesn't look like what we want. It's not impressed with us. And so we're going to have to figure out why we're not getting a value. If we choose a value, notice what happens. Now it's happy. So my lookup works as long as there's an item ID. So what happens here is without the ID number, I can't find anything. So I need to change how I'm doing this. My lookup should only happen when there's something to look up. So I'm going to do an if, but actually I'm going to do a special if. We've done a kind of if. This now is an if that gets us what? If you look down, look at this. If NA. Isn't NA what I was getting? Well, there's an error, and that would cover a few different situations. But this one in particular is if it's not available. So what I want to do then is I'm going to use this to check and see if the lookup is available. So I add at the front. This is another function. I'm adding it before the lookup. And this is going to give me the opportunity to double check before doing a lookup to make sure that it's worth doing the lookup. So the first thing is, what is the value if not available? So in other words, it's going to do the lookup. If it gets an NA back, what is it supposed to do? Well, say nothing. Inherent in that, built into that, is if it's good, then do it. So let's go in here and look up the value. That's it. The table array is the part that's not changing, and I've got it changing. In other words, I need to add $signs. If I press F4, the F4 key, you now see that it adds the $signs. And that's important because my table of references doesn't change. If I copy this down from the first row, because I'm going to copy it all the way down eventually, if I copy this down, it needs to say the same location for the table array because the table array is the same all the way through. And that's important for us to keep in mind. So now that we have fixed our item description, we move on and we're doing more data validation, this time for the date purchase. Now you see there are a number of different kinds of things that we can look at, but the purchase is a date. So there we go. And we want a date that isn't more than 15 days ago. So now will give us a situation. Okay, well, let's go look at the requirements first.
it says that they shouldn't be able to enter something if it's not within 15 days of purchase. So when they come to enter things, we want to validate the date is not more than 15 days ago up to today. So delete the junk that I was putting in there, go back to date purchased. Okay, so what we're doing here is for the start date, it starts 15 days ago. So that's now the date for today minus 15, because 15 represents 15 days. So that's the math to get a date 15 days ago. And of course, the end date will be whatever date we get out of now. So now we will go ahead and click OK and move on to some sort of data validation for our quantity purchased. Now, quantity purchased is interesting. I can just set it up so that it's a whole number. But what kind of whole number? Well, let's take a look at greater than 0. So in other words, it can't be decimal and it has to be greater than 0. Now, why do we do greater than 0? So now, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and choose a currency format because it is a price. Then we're going to take a look at what we need to do for validation. This is interesting here now. So again, the person taking data entry can't read my mind. They could enter 9. What if they do -9? Are they allowed to do -9? You can imagine if they can do either of those, that's a problem. So we're going to go ahead and set up data validation to tell the user what type of number to use. It's a decimal because currency can have decimals. And it's going to be greater than and only greater than 0. Well, I wonder if we should allow it. Yeah, what if it is 0? What if it was given to us? So then minimum should be 0. Okay. So now that we have that, let's take a look at one more step. We don't want people messing with our item description lookup, but our item ID, date purchased, quantity purchased, and price are things that need to be open. So we need to set the format of the cells so that the protection on that is not on. This is to do with protection. We talked about it before. I unlock the cells that are going to need to have data entry before I do protection. Now, like I said, item description needs to be protected. So we're not going to unlock that. You see, it's still locked. And that's good. That's the way it should be. So we're not going to change that. All right, so we've zoomed out, and I'm just doing this. All of our validation format, whatever, is in only the very first row. Nothing else has it. Let's just throw a little bit of shading on this to mark where we have something going on, and then we'll fill handle it down. This will vary by the business, but the point is we are going to do things that are going to involve a table array. And so there, by shading it, we know that up to this location, the users can enter data, of course, except in the item description. All right, so at the end of it, just to make our point, let's add a little message. It doesn't matter for exactly what it says, but it should be clear from what we put here that entering data below this will be a problem. Well, you've seen us select table arrays already, so you understand that if we're going to set up other formulas that are going to look in that first 100 rows, we don't want somebody thinking they can add data below this point. So I don't normally use red and yellow, but this is one example of where it makes sense. All right, so that's got everything in place, but now we need to protect it. So this is protecting the sheet. This is like turning on the security. So the one, remember, we locked the formula. There it is. I cannot enter anything there. However, I can enter data elsewhere. So let's go back. I can type A1 in the name box. And since there's a cell named A1, when I hit enter, it takes me up to A1. And I'm to the top, and I can go ahead and enter some values. I took out the values to copy it down, but now I'm ready to go. So I want to add just a date that's within reason. Obviously, it has to be relative to today. It either has to be today or one of the 15 prior days before today. My quantity purchased, I can't enter a negative, but if I have, there you go. Proved my point. 2.3 is a decimal, and it has to be a whole number. So let's enter a whole number. Yeah, that's a lot, but we'll fix that after. I'm just trying to give you a demo. So unit price, how much does a ream of paper cost? Let's say for now $4.40, and of course if that's wrong, I can come back and change it, which I may very well do. Let's do a second row just to demo it. So right here, item 12 comes up as a box of file folders. It's the same date. Now notice within unprotected cells, I can do copy, I can do fill, I can do various things as the user. Remember, the sheet as a whole is protected, but these cells, I could pretend for a minute that I'm an employee of mine, and I've been telling them to enter some purchases. I gave them the receipts, and they're entering them for me. And here we are, 585 sounds good. All right. So what I'm going to do now is go back and I'll do a whole bunch of, well, a number of data entry items, and then we'll move on from there.